Hello and welcome back to EmComm Solutions. Today we're going to be talking kind of a interesting topic in my opinion. So the correlation or the similarities between amateur radio, at least their origins of amateur radio and LoRa mesh communications, and how I feel like LoRa or Meshtastic is kind of revitalizing a hobby that is, or a portion of a hobby that's kind of been lost through the kind of commercialization, process that LoRa Meshtastic is already starting to see. So, in the beginning here, we're going to talk a little history of like communications slash ham amateur radio, talk some the similarities of these hobbies, and then we'll talk a little bit in the end just to close things out about gatekeepers or jerks in any hobby. So, all right, to start off, as humans, right, we've always strive to find new ways to communicate, whether it's written or verbal, developments of languages, cave art, the telegram, which is considered like the beginning of like amateur radio. That and then amateur radio goes through like its phases. Like World War One, I didn't know this until I did a little bit of research. They were basically banned from operating at all. During World War Two, they were restricted to VHF frequencies only, and then it wasn't until the 50s that the FCC started issuing licenses, at least in the United States. So it's had a long history of development and restrictions, and even before the FCC, but the point here is when I started studying and go a little bit about me. Yes, I do have my technician class license. Had it since 2018. I do have a goal for this year to study and take my general class to get that, so I can move up into the HF frequencies. But I have been active also in the community with learning, or serving as a radio operator on an ARES team and an amateur radio emergency service team in my local community. Yes, I'm here in Europe now. When I return, I'm like on a leave of absence or hiatus, whatever you want to say, from that group. When I return, I will rejoin that and continue serving my community. So I tell you all that kind of backstory is because when I started studying, because I was one of those individuals that bought a Baofeng UV5R before I had my license. No, I didn't transmit on it, but I learned how to program it and monitor repeaters and stuff like that in my local area. And so I learned a little bit about the hobby before I actually started. Then I started studying, and through my studying, you get the perception that everyone in the hobby is really going to be like, building their own antennas and just doing a lot of their own things. And that was kind of how the hobby started, right? These products didn't exist. There wasn't a ham radio outlet or something like that where you could go buy them from a manufacturer. People were building them, so to do what they wanted to do. I was surprised when I joined the community that there was a lot of people that, they don't even make their own coax. Like they don't buy a roll of coax and cut it to whatever desired length and solder onto, ends to it or anything like that, or even install their own mobile radios in their vehicles. They have someone else do it for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just correlating the fact that the hobby kind of went from a DIY hobby to now you just buy commercial products. Not everyone, and I get that, and I'm not, if you're a ham out there and you're like, what, I build my own antennas and I do this and I do that, good for you, and I'm proud of you, but you'll see where I'm going with this here in a second. I guess is the best way to put it. So when it comes to LoRa or Meshtastic, I started 2 years ago, bought a T-beam, had to solder my own OLED screens on, and I'm a fairly confident solderer. I wouldn't consider myself professional, but I've soldered quite a bit over the years, so I wasn't intimidated by having to solder my own screen on. I do like to use if you're getting into soldering or you want to learn, I recommend one of those soldering stations, and the one that's got the magnifying, that especially someone like myself, I'm My vision's not what it used to be. It's really helpful, but anyway, that's a side topic. But so you get the device. You have to do some work to make the device work. Then it doesn't have a case. You got to put a battery in it. You got to update the firmware, which is not too different from an amateur radio these days. You update the firmware, or at least get programming software and upload all your frequencies and set up the radio how you want it. And then you get a case. Well, you get a 3D printed case from somebody on Etsy. Now they're offering them from Rockland. They're just starting to get a little more commercialized with that. Or you get a Heltec, the one little Heltecs, they already come with a case, or a T-Echo that's off the shelf ready. That's why I recommend it to new users if they're intimidated by some of those other barriers. So you grab it, you put it together, you put it in a case, you learn how to set it up, you go through radio configurations, start doing some rain testing, and try to make contacts. Sounds pretty similar to amateur radio, right? And so then you decide, like myself, well, I don't want to have to buy cases from somebody else all the time, and I've always wanted to learn how to do 3D printing, so I buy myself a 3D printer and learn that whole process. And then it's not just for, I didn't just buy it to print out a couple cases. I bought it because I wanted to be able to learn how to use one and how to print. So now all of a sudden I'm off on this sub hobby from my initial hobby, right? And I've learned a lot through that. So, and then if you're really adventurous, you're going to start maybe building your own cases, including solar. Maybe you need to charge controllers. You learn about, I need, I'm going to try to put these type of batteries in there. And then you learn hey, I live in a cold climate and I need to learn, I need to put a heat mat in there if I want it to run off this type of battery. But then like I said, there's so much to learn in the hobby, and it requires you to learn a little bit about electronics and soldering and antennas and propagation and so on and so forth. So very, very similar to amateur radio. And I get it, it's a radio. A lot of people don't call them radios, but they are a radio. They're a two-way radio. They can communicate across the frequency, send a message out and receive a message back. So they are a radio. So a lot of people, they call it Meshtastic, which is just the firmware. LoRa, mesh communications, maybe ISM radio. I don't, I'm stirring the pot here, but so you've learned all these things. Well, that's outstanding, right? That is revitalizing a whole hobby set. There's new people that have never had anything to do with amateur radio, ham, whatever you want to call it, that now are learning the same things without having to get a license. And I'm not saying don't go out and get a license. If that's what you want to do, it's a good stair step. Or maybe you're like myself and you're already, there's a lot of amateur radio guys that are into LoRa Mesh Communications. They're in my Telegram group, which will be linked down below, the LoRa Mesh Communication group, which is over 300 members as of today. So what are we, the 2nd of March in 2024? Outstanding, grown that much since December, very active group. So there's plenty of people that basically, if you're a radio geek like myself or a communications geek like myself, LoRa is where you want to be. So let's wrap this up. Let's talk about gatekeeping. So one of the things that I was hesitant about, almost like a lot of hams or amateur radio operators that I meet, is, oh man, I've heard there's a lot of jerks over there. And but they're not a lot. Yes, they're a percentage of the overall. But the guys I work with in my areas team are amazing. The people I went to a study course at the Tacoma Radio Club there. It's an old historical radio club in Tacoma, Washington. They were outstanding, super friendly. None of that, oh, you bought one of the old Baofeng. They're like, yeah, it's a great starter radio, which I agree, it is a great starter radio. But the point is, don't be a gatekeeper. There's already people that are starting to do that in the LoRa Meshtastic world. Stop. Just go away. Go be a jerk somewhere else. We don't need you. We've talked about it in the Telegram group. Move on. Ignore them. They're just angry people, and no matter what they're doing, there's people in every hobby that are gatekeepers or jerks. You know, if it's car collectors, it's whatever, there's always going to be that person out there that's just, I don't know, they live life miserably, in my opinion. So just ignore them. So if you found any of this interesting, there is a whole pile of links down below. One's our website, which is just forwarded to my current Ravenwood Acres website, to the LoRa Mesh Communication site. There's going to be a playlist here at the end on my Ravenwood Acres channel over here on YouTube that's like 40 plus videos of LoRa Mesh type content. So check that out if you're interested. There's also an emergency communications playlist over there. Check that out if you're interested. Join our Telegram group if you're into LoRa Mesh Communications. Follow me on my other social media links. Subscribe to the channel. That's one way to stay connected. And stay tuned for more great videos. Thanks for watching.